Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, at the global talk of the DELFT Global Initiative. It's great to see that you're here with so many people, and it's great that we are hosted here by the Faculty of Architecture, by the current dean and by the new dean. So thank you for hosting us here. My name is Roel Kamerling, and I'm from the DELFT Global Initiative. I will say a few words about that, and after that we will start with a lecture from PK Das. So first of all, the DELFT Global Initiative is a program within the Technical University of Delft, and we work on many challenges in the global south. So specifically sub-Saharan Africa and Southeast Asia. What we are looking for are low resource settings, and what we can contribute there as TU Delft with our research and education and entrepreneurship activities. So we have now 6 spearhead programs, and I want to mention them briefly to you because we invite many people from TU Delft and also partners in the Netherlands or in Africa or in Asia to participate in these programs. So we have healthcare for all, and this specifically we focus at diagnostics and on surgery. Then we have plastic-free rivers, a new program to make sure that we can find plastics, that we can collect it in rivers, do recycling, and make sure that it doesn't end up in the ocean. And we do that in the Netherlands and in Ghana and in Indonesia. And then we have inclusive cities for all, and that's also from this faculty of architecture is actually the main body, but also other faculties participate, like civil engineering or TBM or industrial design. And just this morning, a program was launched. It's the Global Urban Lab. So there are about 100 researchers from all over the university working on this program. Then we have Internet of Things and affordable sensors to collect information in places where there is none. For instance, weather data in Africa. We have airports in disaster areas, and only this Monday, a new sort of hackathon program started in the faculty of TBM to collect information about Mozambique. So what's happening there? A lot of information is absent, and TU Delft is working with students and researchers on collecting information and providing it to the aids, to the people working there right now. And the last program is global drinking water. So what we would like to do is ask you, if you haven't already, subscribe and list, follow us, see if you can do in your research or in your education activities, graduation projects, try to see if you can play a part in that. Because it's very exciting and very necessary. And we have now a community of about 200 researchers and 400 students already did programs in this. So please be invited to participate in this. But for today, you are in for a treat because we have a very great lecture today by PK Das, and last night we had dinner with him, and so this is going to be a really great talk. I'm really sure of that. And PK is coming from Mumbai. He's architect over there, and throughout his career, he's been working with the slums and growing cities all over the world. And he got some prizes for that says something about the level of which he is doing this, really on a global scale. Working with the TU Delft also as a visiting professor in last year. But I would like to highlight 2 of the prizes that he got. The first one is the Urban Age Award. That's really for the waterfront activities that he did in Mumbai. And he actually got that from Angela Merkel, the Bundeskanzler in Deutschland. And the other one is the International Jane Jacobs Medal. from the Rockefeller Foundation. And actually, this is also an activist from New York. So hence the title architect and activist is really fitting for the speaker that we have today. So I would like to invite PK Des to come and start his story. And after that, we will come back for you to ask questions or have some comments on the story. So please give a warm hand to PK.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for that introduction. I must thank Professor Dirk Gameron and Professor Royal Kamerling for inviting me over here to this prestigious talk, and other professors and staff who've been active with the global initiative at the DELFT, TU Delft. To call my talk global is a bit embarrassing to me, actually, because for all along I have been a Mumbai local, and I really haven't done much work internationally. I've been sort of in Mumbai all the time. For the past 40 years I've been working there. And ever since I came to study architecture in the year 1972, the city has been my workshop and a place that has profoundly influenced my ideas, my thoughts and ideas about people and places. So the city really has been my workshop, as even local people refer to. But if there's any one thing that I may state as being the most important learning from my living and working in Mumbai, it is the need for collective intervention in the current trend of exclusionary urban development, with an objective of achieving social and environmental equity and justice for all. Also, as a necessary condition, as I consider it, each individual intervention must be linked to other democratic rights movements, thereby building a network of interventions towards evolving an alternate vision of people for the city. It is with this objective that I consider building relationships collectively between people and nature, and with nature, as an important mission. This is the essence of my talk today, focused on an understanding of these relationships and networks of interactions, particularly those that develop in the process of collective interventions by citizens on demands pertaining to social and environmental justice, and how they contribute to the larger interest of sustainability of cities. I like to view cities from a social and environmental perspective and understand how the two together constitute a necessary condition and their persuasion as a means for the achievement of a higher state of urbanization of the city. I'll come to that a bit later. What do I mean by urbanization of the city? The two are inextricably entwined and neither are exclusive. That's environment and people. Thus, a sustainable ecology of cities is possible when we can successfully combine environmental and socio-economic dimensions equally in the plans and actions that we pursue. As a matter of fact, it is the extent of their integration and inclusion that really I consider forms the basis of evaluation of our work value and engagements. I sort of constantly try and judge my occupation, my work, and the value of my engagements just on that criteria. For an understanding of collective interventions and ecological scrutiny, I will get on to discussing just one significant citizen struggle in Mumbai, which I refer to as the Irla Nala movement, as an example. What this example is, even though this example is specific to Mumbai, to a Mumbai neighborhood, the issues they raise will hopefully resonate in the experiences that all of you have in your respective places of familiarity, particularly those in the global south, maybe in Africa, Latin America, and South Asia. The overarching ideas and the principles would hopefully be the same, thus invoking a dialogue and a solidarity amongst us. But before I get onto the Irla Nala example, I'd like to present a network of movements, 22 years and continuing, that provide a historical perspective to the Irla movement and its position in the larger context of the city. That's very important because, as I said, each individual movement cannot be seen in isolation, as indeed must be a part of a network of larger movements and other movements. So here is a glimpse of 22 years of my work and engagements in various and several movements in Mumbai. That includes various publications, posters, campaign material, plans, participatory plans, projects that have been implemented in Mumbai over the past 35 years that has in a way reinforced the entire argument that I'm making that public action does significantly influence decisions that governments make, and we can bring about significant change through those actions. These various projects that I've participated in are limited to housing, most particularly social housing, open spaces, and environment. It is the constant and deliberate erosion of public spaces, the denial of access to housing for most people, of vast numbers of people in cities like in Mumbai. We have more than 7 million people denied dignified housing, for example, and the rampant destruction of natural areas and the environment that has compelled me to engage with these issues. We very often find ourselves, well, just to put the Irla Nala in perspective, the Irla Nala project is a part of the larger movement for reclaiming public spaces, which in turn is really working through a larger movement of the neighborhood people, and which in turn is influencing the re-envisioning of the city. So it's, these are the kinds of connections and relationships that I'm constantly sort of pondering and working on. Very often we find ourselves absorbed into zones of comfort and complacence, engaging in issues and places that have developed or achieved exclusivity. But to get out and engage with situations of instability and discomfort, dealing with the invisible yet perceived barriers across city landscapes and the unification is indeed challenging. After all, what can be more equal between nations influenced by neoliberal globalization, privatization, than the question of land misutilization, exclusionary city planning, and deplorable state of the environment in which vast numbers of people are discriminated and subject to climate risk. It is for these reasons that the local struggles of the marginalized and the discriminated people across borders and nation states for equality and sustainability are indeed global in their essence and spirit. As these conflicts begin to dominate our cities and the city landscape, we are compelled to intervene, particularly in the excluded, discriminated, and much abused backyards of people and places that are in most instances situated in the borders, edges, peripheries, and margins. The Irla Nala and its immediate precinct is one such area in which in Mumbai we have turned our backs to. I will very briefly tell you about what this Irla Nala movement is about, very briefly, for I'm not going to get into the details of the project. I'd like to discuss more the ideas and the objectives of this project. In the year 2013, the citizens of Juhu, which is a neighborhood in Mumbai, a 4 square kilometer neighborhood in the western suburbs of Mumbai, launched the Irla Nala movement for the conservation, reinvigoration, and reintegration of the 7.5 kilometer Nalla. Most of the over 300 kilometers of Nalla in Mumbai, this amazing city has over 300 kilometers of these Nallas that include the Irla Nala, were originally natural water courses of the estuary, or rivers connected to the sea and thereby the tides. These water courses regulated groundwater level and assist in dispersing flood water from the land in case of intense rain. Unfortunately, over the years, they have been abused. becoming a waste and sewage drain, which take the effluents out onto the sea. Sadly, the city governments have also channelized them by building impervious concrete walls along their edges, thus further severing the ecological and environmental attributes and separating them from the people. At the time when the Irla Nala reinvigoration movement was launched, the municipal authorities of the city wondered why this was important. Also, the people living in Mumbai generally associate nallas with dirt, filth, and odor. Over the years, there's very little public knowledge of them being rivers and natural watercourses that define the landscape of the city. Battling such impediments, the movement continued. Comprehensive plans and implementation programs were created through active citizens' participation. Posters, meetings were held in public places with posters such as these. Juhu Giri Pyar Se, taken from a colloquial slang, Dadagiri, which means by coercive force. Here it is reinterpreted as a collective power of the people of Juhu. Pyar Se means with a bit of love. So here's the coercive force of the people of Juhu with a bit of love that defines the project, and that's the campaign, and along with that, a book, Vision Juhu, was also published. The city officials could no longer ignore the gathered momentum of the citizens' movement. The municipal commissioner finally approved the project 11 months later, even in spite of us having forcibly started a part of the project. Today, people in large numbers flock the redeveloped areas along the Nala and its precinct. The Irla Nala reinvigoration plan, advocating the larger Juhu vision plan that I talked about, focuses on cleaning and turning the waters of the polluted and much abused natural watercourse and its immediate precinct into a vibrant public space and a neighborhood forecourt, generating rich social, political, and environmental dividends. What we are deeply concerned about is the constant division of our cities into disparate fragments, both in social and spatial terms. Polarization of people and communities in terms of their religion, race, caste, class, faith, gender, nationality, you name it, is leading to social instability and tension. Indeed, our cities are producing and reproducing backyards of exclusion, discrimination, hatred, neglect, and abuse. Even natural habitats are being systematically destroyed, leading to increasing levels of social intolerance and climate catastrophe, thus undermining the very idea of cities and their sustainability. Very quickly, a few pictures of the Irla Nala project after a few months of when it started. This is just a part picture of the Nala, which is otherwise 7 kilometers long. It's a part of the 300 kilometers of water courses that you see that define the landscape of Mumbai. It's amazing to look at a map like this of the city with the number of water courses that crisscrosses the neighborhoods and the city, in which we also have rivers, 4 rivers that people never realized there were rivers. This is the plan of the Juhu area with the Irla Nala flowing down from the north, from the sea, joining the sea on the top, down to the sea on the south. You have then a plan that was drawn up by the neighborhood movement that identified all public institutions marked in yellow here. It identified all the public open spaces and began to network public institutions and spaces to expand public realm. These are some of the pictures before and after. Some of the pictures above, with the concrete walls being built by the corporation, halted with the movement, and the movement that develops an intense public space on both sides of the Irla Nala. And an intense battle, local battle of the people, including moving to the courts, public interest litigations, roadblocks, and so on and so forth. And this is how the Nala actually winds across the neighborhood of Juhu. Importantly, through the Irla Nala movement, we could generate, and we have generated, a pulsating system of public spaces, including the Nala, that would form the spine of the neighborhood. I will now very quickly get on to 6 or rather 5 now, we've cut down the 6 to 5, important ideas that Irla Nala project evokes from an activist perspective. The first one is about, I'll just run through them, evolving a plan for transformative citywide change, neighborhood-based city planning as an idea of city development, collective mapping and open data, which is the third, and the fourth is what I'm avoiding now to cut down on my talk, and the fifth, which is the fourth now, would be urban planning and design as a right, which I've been claiming, and the last but not the least is ecology, environment, and political movement. Imagine a scenario where Mumbaikars, the people of Mumbai, have easy access to over 600 kilometers of landscaped walkways and cycling tracks and open spaces along the 300 kilometers of the watercourses. The plan proposes a citywide network. The plan proposes a citywide network of connected public spaces that include the natural areas and the different biosystems in the city. This is the overarching vision, that is, to re-envision the city. That has manifested itself in a tangible pilot project, the Irla Nala Reinvigoration Project. Now here's the map of Mumbai that was displayed in an enormous exhibition called the Open Mumbai Exhibition, where all the red lines tells you that there is 600 kilometers of connected public space possible by the reinvigoration of the waterfronts, watercourses of Mumbai. The Irla movement brings light to the continuing degradation of the vital 140 square kilometers area, natural areas of the city. So it's not just the watercourses. The watercourses constitute a part of the 140 square kilometers natural areas of the city. It's mangroves, wetlands, creeks, salt pans, rivers, lakes, beaches, hills, and forests. Sadly, the city, as many other cities in the world, have turned its back to this vast extent and diverse extent of the natural areas and considered them as a dumping ground, both physically and metaphorically, leading to their rampant destruction and degradation. For long, our discourses on cities have relied on understanding of social relationships, right? We've always talked about people and how the modes of production have influenced their formation. To support this statement, I would like to refer to David Harvey when he quotes from Karl Marx in his book, Social Justice and the City. I quote, "The totality of these relationships of production constitutes the economic structure of society, the real foundation on which arises a legal and political superstructure and to which correspond definite forms of social consciousness. The mode of production of material life conditions the general process of social, political, and intellectual life. In terms of Marx's terminology, unquote, the urban and the process of urbanization are simple superstructures of the mode of production." That's how the Marxist theories have always illustrated and written about. But further, in the same book, Harvey goes further and has analyzed social relations with built form and environment and how each influences the other. But his reference to environment, sadly, is restricted to built environment and does not include the natural ecosystems. And I quote, "Urbanism may be regarded as a particular form of patterning of social process. This process unfolds in a spatially structured environment created by man. The city can therefore be regarded as a tangible built environment, an environment which is a social product." So there was this overbearing sort of priority on social structures as being the basis of cities and the built environment. But interestingly, on the other hand, Pickett, Cadenosa, and Macrath, in their landmark book, which I consider very, very significant, titled Resilience in Ecology and Urban Design, quotes McGrahan and Satterwhite in their book, present a wider understanding of the environment. And I quote, "A great deal of the urban sustainability literature tends to promote the so-called brown agenda of environmentalism, which emphasizes the need to solve immediate needs of the billions of people who live in degraded, unsanitary conditions and grueling poverty. While the green agenda emphasizes protection and enhancement of ecosystems to support future generations and other species. Reconciling green with the brown agenda, however, is at the heart of more encompassing viewpoints on sustainability. Recognizing that poverty and environment conservation are inextricably entwined. This is the reconciliation which is indeed the essence of the IRLA movement. On the other hand, tragically, as Mumbai expands and as many cities world over expand, its open spaces are shrinking rapidly. With one of the lowest ratios in Mumbai of open spaces to people, nearly 1 square meter per person, which is an amazing figure. This phenomena is realized in many world cities. I remember our friends from Ethiopia, Addis Ababa, where the governments are now beginning to start their rehabilitation construction with the first open space they can locate in the city, thereby completely ensuring the depletion of the open spaces. But this phenomenon is realized in many cities, many world cities, more critically experienced cities in the cities of the developing nations. While cities are expanding, public spaces are rapidly shrinking in both physical and democratic terms. The democratic space that ensures accountability and enables dissent is also shrinking, very subtly but surely. This means that space for wider participation and dialogue are indeed shrinking. It is in these prevailing conditions that we are compelled to pursue the idea of public spaces as being the foundation of city planning. Public spaces ensure physical, social, and democratic well-being. Very quick look at some of the treasures of Mumbai's ecology and that vast extent of 140 square kilometers of natural areas that I talked about. Another objective of such movements as the IRLA movement ought to be to the conservation of the vital natural assets, their integration with the neighborhoods and the city, expanding public spaces, both in physical and democratic terms, expanding tree cover, popularizing and demystifying the planning process for effective participation, and promoting the idea of neighborhood-based city planning. The IRLA Reinvigoration Project models in Mumbai today a paradigm shift in the understanding of Mumbai's ecology and build in a sustainable manner with nature and its benefits to improve with equity and quality. Hello? Yeah, sorry. To improve with equity the quality of life of all Mumbaikars. It's about building new relationships, as I kept talking about right at the start. Relationships between people and people with nature. In the redeveloped sections of the IRLA Nala, a new relationship between people and public spaces that includes the Nala waters is emerging. What was for many years a filthy backyard to the city and the neighborhood has now been transformed into a forecourt of social and cultural activity. A sense of pride and belonging can be seen in the people who live around these waterfronts and in those who visit them. Such emerging relationships are particularly significant at a time when there is a huge deficit of relationships that are based on the question of sustainable ecology, the environment in particular. Such movements are not seen merely as a beautification program, but as a part of a larger democratic struggle for reclaiming public space and to create spaces where people meet, share their experiences, and begin to care about each other and garner social relationships collectively between them and nature. It is in this context I consider our struggles to pursue the idea of unification of cities. And this is very significant as cities stand fragmented, divided. To pursue the idea of unification of cities through architectural and design endeavors as being important. Maybe I'm tickling the architects in the room here. While engaging closely with social and environmental movements, our priority has to be to establish a close relationship between architecture and people, placing strong emphasis on participatory planning from the very beginning and at every stage of our work. With the Nalla and the public spaces being the main planning criteria, we hope to bring about over a period of time social change, promoting collective culture and rooting out alienation and false sense of individual self-gratification, which is increasingly promoted by the market. Unjust social systems are inherently unsustainable. The linear parks created along the Nalla will create more livable neighborhoods for more people in an equitable way. This equitable expression of nature-based solutions is truly sustainable. The IRLA project is a demonstration of the importance of the neighborhood-based planning and designs for the preparation of the city's development plans. That means we have what I call such an approach facilitates local people's active participation in matters concerning their area, which they know best, while influencing the city's planning and development decisions. Through a neighborhood-based development approach, it is possible to decentralize and localize projects. And this is very significant, thus breaking away from the monolithic planning and design ideas that are disconnected from most people. Master plans, as we call them, for cities are generally top-down models, drafted by elite groups of designers and fail to engage with citizens on their ideas. With localized projects, the planning of cities will hopefully become a bottom-up process with participation of all the people. Importantly, neighborhood scale work is more collaborative in approach to city and place making. For citizens, such projects allow immediate reclamation, redesign, and reprogramming of public spaces within their localities. A very quick glance through some of the IRLA Nala, some of the waterfronts project, which forms the background to the IRLA Nala. This is the Juhu Vision book that was published. This is another coastline of Mumbai. You can see slides before, after. I'll just very quickly run through them. But these significant transformations and interventions has reinforced the idea of participatory governance and participatory planning in Mumbai. Yet another waterfront. We've already converted more than 8 kilometers of waterfronts and have brought them under citizens' control. Yet another one. I'm not going through the details of this. You can see the before slide to your left and the ones after. A cultural square and an amphitheater on the waterfront, which had been abandoned and taken over and encroached upon. A beach that has been reclaimed. The wetlands. Yet another beach with the fishing communities in there, which is under process of being restored and reclaimed. Gardens along the Nalla. And a city forest as an idea that really is being talked about and promoted. And city parks. And cultural squares. I now go very quickly to the third point, and I have just two more. The third is called the collective mapping and open data. It is with an idea of achieving unification and sustainability of urban landscape that Open Mumbai plan was prepared by the Mumbai Waterfront Center and architects P.K. Das and Associates, beginning with mapping Mumbai's landscape. This was for the first time done on a voluntary basis by us. A sustained campaign around data obtained from mapping, published in a book titled Open Mumbai, has succeeded in many ways. The current development plan of the city, which has just been launched a few months back, for the first time has recognized the natural areas covering the vast stretch of 140 square kilometers that I talked about as being a special reservation, which otherwise was never and was always vulnerable to encroachments. These natural areas are now integrated to the overall idea of open spaces for the city. We also did, for the first time, mapping of all the open spaces of the city, along with the natural areas. More importantly, placing natural areas in the public spaces domain will slowly but surely lead people to realizing the significance of these assets in their daily life experiences and in their neighborhoods and the city. Such an outcome is already evident in the ongoing IRLA Nala project. In order to intervene with an objective of achieving unification of the divided urban landscape, we also did for the first time the mapping of the slums of Mumbai with startling data that challenged the mainstream data of the government. The process of mapping is an effective means for mobilizing participation. And that was really an incredible movement. Promoting open data and organizing public dialogues are the key tenets of democracy. Mapping is a significant political act as it opens new doors to socio-political understanding and valuation of our resources. natural and man-made both. A collective mapping process is also necessary in order to challenge the information and data that is meted out regularly by governments and their various agencies, as these two publications brought out in Mumbai, one to do with the open spaces and the other to do with the slums, which, as we know in many instances, is propagandist and not necessarily in the wider public interest. As Noam Chomsky puts it in his book, data is continuously manufactured, and that's so true. Such a process would also mandate wider public dialogue into historical evidences and studies, while evolving alternate plans for now and the future. So mapping is not just about documenting. Mapping is also about an interactive process of evolving a vision to the future. And that's the dynamics of a mapping process. Maps are an insight into a nation's progress, indeed. Not maps that define national boundaries, but maps that define cities and neighborhoods. Maps that reveal the resources we may have lost or colonized. Maps that make us vigilant and protective. Effort must be made continuously to map the city in extensive detail if we are to build a more equitable city for its citizens. I mean, this is what is quoted from the Open Mumbai publication. I will now move on to the fifth section, or the fourth section, which is really one of my favorite engagements in Mumbai, I would say, and that is to claim that urban planning and design ought to be a right, as much as other rights, like human rights, civil rights, or right to education, right to healthcare, and so on and so forth. Planning and architecture are an effective democratic tool of social change, an instrument for mobilizing collective movements. This is very important. This is what we realize. Cities are not spaces for competition, not for individual and disparate efforts. To me, they are a fantastic opportunity for forging collective and cooperative effort. Larger public participation and engagement of people's organizations in the development process truly helps develop a city, and planning and architecture should integrate with it for enabling social changes and achieving development justice. For me, it's urban planning and design that provides incredible power for the achievement of the objectives of unification of people, places, and nature. It is for this reason I've been arguing that participation in urban planning and design need to be considered a right, and the popularization and its popularization and democratization of the same is indeed important for that objective. We can plan cities taking into account existing land occupation patterns. This is one of the demands I put up at the United Nations Habitat Congress in Quito, because everybody pours out with their hearts against displacements and how poor are being thrown around and displaced in cities. And so I made a small suggestion that can we then pass a resolution at the United Nations and force that upon nation members that we accept and recognize the existing land use occupation patterns, and particularly those of the slums and informal sectors, and many more backyards of abuse and discrimination, rather than cause displacements and or neglect them due to the imposition of land use plans that are based on skewed planning standards and vested political interests that we architects and planners sit in our conference rooms and keep producing forever. We must re-envision our cities on the basis of unification of the disparate parts and the dismantling of the many walls that have been built over the years. Achieving contiguity through unbarricading spaces will enable the building of self-supportive structures of harmony and resilience. Unfortunately, movements concerning planning and design matters has not evolved adequately to influence change towards the unification of the fragmented landscapes and the achievement of sustainable ecology. Planning and design knowledge is considered to be technical and the domain of qualified architects and planners. This exclusivity of knowledge, coupled with the distance that the fraternity of architects, planners, engineers, and other technocrats have maintained from people and their struggles over the years, is making this task even more difficult. Such separation has also not let the fraternity think of new ideas in theory and practice for understanding the enormous potential that planning and design exercises have in mobilizing people to participate and through that popularize knowledge. So there were several publications that we keep bringing out in Mumbai. Some of these books, two of them are available or would be available in the bookshop here downstairs, maybe in a day or two. And you could go and buy them, one of them being the On the Waterfront, which really records all these movements and talks about the ideas that I just now spoke about. And the second is Chasing the Affordable Dream. It's a book about the housing question pertaining to Mumbai, but has international reflections in that. Importantly, the Irla Nala movement plan and the movement demonstrates that such ideas relating to expansion of public spaces could not have been envisioned by any formal master planning. Certainly not. And we go on with this whole thing about popularizing by having public exhibitions and posters brought out for slums rehabilitation, exhibitions concerning public spaces, housing, environment, all along in the city. Popularizing of ideas and knowledge is a big and complex process, since they are rooted in the social and political ideologies and objectives. As we experience, participation is based on race, gender, religion, faith, and class prejudice and social division. Plans and proposals that are mooted by governments reflect these preferences the preferences of the dominant groups. Public dialogue is invariably a dialogue of such groups. That's another internal challenge we have within our movements, that the certain dominant classes, which are already privileged, begin to take over and dominate the discourses in the public sphere. Such political and social conditions pose significant challenges to progressive and liberal movements in the city. Evolving effective tactics through interventions and strategy, that is to a vision for the city, is the building of urban movements. In the building of urban movements and the democratization of urban ecology are significant challenges that we have to deal with constantly. And this is my last chapter. The global discussion surrounding developing sustainable cities for the future is centered to environmental protection, upgradation, and integration. Quite naturally, natural environments need to be reinvigorated to mitigate the harm done to them through mindless construction over the years. For the Irla movement, rejuvenating and reinvigorating the Nallas becomes a point of entry into dealing with the larger issue of safeguarding and integrating our natural areas and resources. Through initiatives like the Irla Nala project, we aim to bring about these natural assets to the forefront in order to protect them, facilitating the right of way for these streams to function efficiently while including and ensuring additional space for their swell and growth. Will allow citizens to understand. These processes will allow citizens to understand the role they play in the larger ecological scheme of the city. The struggle for unification of the broken pieces of urban ecology is a political battle that has to be pursued through democratic struggles. Public action, and I quote here from Amartya Sen, the Nobel laureate, public action can play a central role in economic development and in bringing social opportunities within the reach of the people as a whole. What the governments ends up doing can be deeply influenced by the pressures they are put on the governments by the public. What we require for the achievement of sustainable cities is a citizens-based, knowledge-driven movement for repairing and reunifying the fragmented and dysfunctional urban landscapes. My view is that our counter struggles to repair and unify our fragmented and dysfunctional urban landscapes will succeed only when they're turned into significant political movements and network with several movements across sectors, including human rights and other struggles in the city. To conclude, I would like to sort of make a slightly instigating point or a critical view of mine. And I'd like to end with this critical view that I have on the question of urbanization and cities. Often, and almost in every conference, we read urbanization and cities as being synonymous. And this is what I object to. And there is a reason why I do that. I'm compelled to consider building of cities and urbanization as independent processes. Even though city building is an incredible means for the achievement of the objectives of urbanization, in spite of the fact that the two are inextricably connected. As I understand, urbanization is a process that promotes human development in a sustainable environment and provides opportunity for liberation from oppression, subjugation, discrimination, and ensures access to various human development opportunities: housing, healthcare, safe drinking water, education, and the whole lot of them you have. An urban way of life can be even ensured in a village, for that matter. So why can we, and how do we, with such effortless, without any effort, without any thinking, we sort of use both so synonymously, particularly given the fact that cities have been highly discriminatory. Cities have been exclusive. Cities have denied to larger populations of access to healthcare and education, suppressing human development endeavors. And such discrimination, such polarization of people and communities certainly is not urban, and certainly cities can't be claimed to be synonymous with urbanization. I'm making this point strongly only to reinforce the idea that certainly cities are the best means for the achievement of the goals of urbanization, but in the present context, and they do not, we need to distinguish them to achieve that objective. The exclusion and more people from the benefits of development across cities is squarely a failure of the current growth pattern, which are steadfastly undermining the very idea of cities. Tragically, cities are being rapidly divided into disparate fragments of exclusive communities and marginalized populations. A failure to ensure the basic human rights to a vast majority of the city population exposes our failure in urbanization while challenging our collective capacity and capabilities. Struggles for sustainable ecology achievement is essentially a democratic rights struggle. Movements and struggles for sharing and democratizing public spaces and resources are effective democratic means for the achievement of equal and just cities. Participatory development plans and programs are a necessary tenet of democracy. It is a struggle not just for individuals' gain, but also for building collective power. These are the values upon which the IRLA movement is based. In my introduction and in the popularizing planning section, I said planning and design are incredible democratic tools of social and environmental change. However, this tool is best utilized for the transformation of space and production of space. It is the transformation of space that significantly affects individual and collective relationship. I quote here from an author who's one of my most fond writers. He's no more. That's Henry Lefebvre. How can we radically alter the prevailing notions about the production of space? How can we build cities or something that replaces what was formerly the city? How can we reconceptualize the urban phenomenon? The ongoing process of separation, and the quote continues from another paragraph, the ongoing process of separation and segregation break the relationship between people and nature. They constitute a totalitarian order whose strategic goal is to break down concrete totality, to break the urban. Segregation complicates and destroys complexity, a necessary sustainability criteria. It is in this context that the participation in urban planning and design with social and environmental outreach, that's the topic given to me or was outlined by the global initiative for me, ought to be considered a right. The democratization of planning and design, indeed of sustainability, would be a significant step towards the urbanization of cities. The content of my presentation has been possible due to the active support of a very dear friend, late Darrell De Monte, a very eminent environmental journalist and activist who passed away just 15 days ago, and Samarth Das, an architect and urban designer. These ideas and works that I showed and I referred to is by no means my individual work, but a vast collective and cooperative struggle for dignity and rights. Collaboration and transparency are indeed a high point of this project. Multiple stakeholders' collaboration includes the residents of Juhu, particularly the Gulmohar Residents Area Association, Mr. Javed Akhtar, an eminent lyricist and member of parliament, who contributed funds for this project, the municipal corporation, National Environmental Engineering Research Institute, KRVIA, a neighborhood-based college of architecture, PUDI, which is Participatory Urban Design and Development Initiative, and the various elected representatives of the area, including the Office of P.K. Das and Associates. Thank you all for your patient hearing. Thank you very much.
So, PK, thank you very much for your talk. Please come and stay with us. So, I can imagine there are some questions for PK Das. And for that, we have this instrument here. So, I would like to ask any people with questions, raise your hand, and I will throw you the microphone.
Hello. So my question is, if in a city like Mumbai, if you want to achieve a rapid expansion of the public spaces, I would assume that you would need to address in some way the problem of the real estate racket and of land speculation and of the big interests which are in land, which will obviously would be a competing factor for the spaces. So how could you go about that?
Well, indeed, that's always what we face, and this project also confronted that. One of the big parks along the Irla Nala were actually been captured by a developer, and he had started with pile foundations to build a club building for private interest. And that was stopped by the citizens' movement, fought in the legal courts, and brought a state to, and the land was reclaimed and redeveloped. So, yes, you're right. These struggles, only people's public action can prevent even governments and their nexus with unscrupulous developers who are forever undermining public interest and larger public good. That's a big battle, indeed.
Just please throw that.
Thanks. Thank you very much for that very interesting speech. I was wondering how you see and I think you swiftly mentioned that there are also these middle class groups, I think they are called the Residents' Welfare Association or something like that, who, as far as I know, are often also advocating, for instance, the removal of slums because they regard them as a nuisance.
Well, that's where people like us do come in, activists come in. Planners come in and other people come in. We've resisted that in each of the waterfront projects that we've developed. In fact, our argument is to, as I said, recognize all existing land occupation patterns and reaccommodate all existing realities in the planning and the replanning of the area. So you don't have to displace them. There has been a peculiar demand from middle-class residents often of walling these spaces and prohibiting free access. We've resisted that too, and it's been successful. None of these waterfront projects or public parks have compound walls. They're like 2-foot walls, so you can actually jump in at any point and walk in. But they've been maintained, so the culture's evolved over the years through the local movement. And that's a process that's forever dynamic and evolving. There are challenges, indeed. Yes, please.
Okay, thank you very much. Actually, I wanted to ask a brief question.
Please talk in the cube.
Okay. So I'm just looking at this, like you've coined a different meaning to urbanization, actually. When you say urbanization of cities, it looks like cleansing of the cities, like the way to make them more inclusive through urbanization. In the first place, isn't the way the cities came, like through urbanization? I mean, the cities came through urbanization, and in the first place, those you called
the cities came.
Yeah, the cities
Not
came.
necessarily urbanization is my argument. City building is not urbanization. It's city building, it's city making, it's objects.
Yeah.
It's commodification of goods, including social services. It's not necessarily urbanization. As I said, access to health care, for example, or education, would mean an urban condition, which can be ensured even in a village, which is not ensured in a city necessarily for most people. But look at what happened historically. When the working class first moved to cities, and for the first time ever, as farmers from the villages came to the gates of the industries, they breathed a sense of liberation and freedom. For they could, for the first time, collectively, as unions, take decisions that affected their work and places and lives. That was urbanization. That could be referred to as urbanization. Liberation, freedom, choices, not denials, not exclusions. So it's a process of urbanization. I'm only making this distinction to make a point that cities are still an incredible means to do that. But we're not doing that. And we're loosely using these words. Rapid organization, casual urbanization, all kinds of words being used. My God, I mean, it sort of really defeats me. How we just loosely define them. Rapid growth in urbanization. Where is the rapid growth of urbanization? Just by the fact that people move from the villages to the cities? Makes it rapid urbanization? No, it's rapid building of cities. Rapid migration to cities. Not necessarily to urban conditions of living. So think about it. I'm just put in a controversial sort of discussion, but I firmly believe in this. And I suggest strongly read Henry Lefebvre, who has quite to an extent theoretically explained this. An amazing French writer was discovered 15 years after his death. His first book was ever translated and has dominated the discourses in theory of urbanization.
So it is really clear to me.
That's right. Yeah, I'm sorry about that. That's discovered in English language and widely published then, yes.
So it is really clear to me why you are an activist, because of the way how you are emotional about this topic. So it's really very good to see that. So are there any more questions? I saw some other hands behind you.
Thanks. Thank you for your inspiring lecture. Talking about engaging to significant political movements, as you told us in the sixth point, I was wondering if you can tell us from your experience which are the limits and the links to escalate this kind of community-based movements into governmental frameworks, and how do you see also the role of NGOs or other global programs as UN Habitat, for example, into this making of urbanization?
I'll avoid a total answer to your question, both because it would take a long time to do that. There are books written on NGOization and how many NGOs undermine the struggles of communities and people in a sense. But I'm not getting into that. There are mixed responses. There are NGOs who are doing brilliant work and championing rights of the people. And there are many NGOs who are undermining the rights of people. So there is a difference in that, and I'll not really get into that. That's what I meant by I'll avoid a total answer to that question, because it's a very significant political question that you've raised. The whole theory of NGOization is something which is very critical from an activist point of view, from a political struggle point of view, for liberation and equality and justice and rights. So I'll leave it at that. I'm sorry about that. We can talk about it later maybe.
So actually with that, I have to end this session here today because it's 1:30 and that's how we schedule it. But as you know, the African Perspectives Conference is taking place these days, and PK will be here for some more time. So catch him in the hallway if you have any further questions. I would like to thank all of you for being present here today and have a very practical question. Please take away all the cutlery and the plates outside. And I would like to thank PK Des. Thank you very much for having your talk. And one last hand of applause, please.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you. Thank you, Robert. Thank you.